The market continues to sell off as the US government liquidates 3,940 Bitcoin today. Don't they realize they're trading something that they can't make more of for something that they can just print out of thin air? In order to build a dynasty in sports or a superpower as a country, you have to think for the long term. Have Bitcoin? Welcome to Bitcoin Daily. I'm Dante Cook, head of Swan Business. Just a few hours ago, Woj announced a blockbuster trade. The New York Knicks and the Brooklyn Nets have agreed in principle to trade Mikal Bridges to the Knicks for Bojan Bogdanovic, 4 first-round draft picks which are unprotected, a protected first-round draft pick, a swap, as well as a future second-round draft pick. If I'm counting correctly, that's 7 draft picks and a player. They obviously have the desire to win right now, and somebody in their front office is a Villanova Wildcat, as they have Josh Hart, Dante DiVincenzo, Jalen Brunson, and now Mikal Bridges back in the band together. The main point is the Knicks are selling their future to win right now. This reminds me of the trade between the Minnesota Vikings and the Dallas Cowboys, who ended up sending Herschel Walker to the Vikings in exchange for 7 future first-round draft picks, which allowed the Cowboys to go on their Super Bowl dynasty with Jimmy Johnson as the head coach. But you know what was the most important thing? They were trading a commodity right now in the short term, which for all of us is fiat, for something that's going to protect their value in the long term. And you know what reminds me of this? Fellow Bitcoin video creator and YouTuber Joe Burnett showed in a tweet today that things that are priced in Bitcoin get cheaper over time. The US median home price in 2012 cost you 50,616 Bitcoin. In 2024, that's just 7 Bitcoin. And thinking long term continues to give me hope on days like today where the market is sideways. And you know what? We're probably having another down day because there continues to be selling pressure in the market from miners, from exchanges liquidating, and also the US government selling 3,940 Bitcoin, almost $240 million worth to Coinbase today. Don't they realize they're selling something that they can't create more of for something that they can create out of thin air? Literally. Like the Knicks and the Minnesota Vikings, it's short-term thinking. You see, over the long term, fiat currencies all end up with the same fate. Take the yen, for example. If you look at this chart, the yen is as weak as it's been against the US dollar as it was in the late 1980s, almost 40 years ago. So people that invest into fiat currencies over the long term end up getting right back to the same place where they started at best. On average, they're typically being debased through inflation and fiat currency debasement. In order to be a good investor, you have to think long term and you have to protect your assets by buying harder assets than the assets that are being created. And over the long term, this gives me lots of hope for Bitcoin. There's a generational divide on who thinks Bitcoin is good in the long term in this country. Investors between the ages of 21 and 43 think that Bitcoin and digital assets have good long-term growth potential, compared to just 4% of investors who are 44 years old and older. Contrast that with stocks, where the younger investors, aged 21 through 43, just 14% of them believe that stocks have good long-term growth potential, compared to 41% of people who are over 44 years old believing the same thing. It's such a generational divide between millennials and younger and everyone else. But simple investing principles tell you that placing all of your eggs in the basket of what worked in the past is not necessarily a good recipe for future results and future returns. Which is why politicians like Matt Gaetz introducing policy that would allow people to pay for federal income taxes in Bitcoin and potentially paving the way for Bitcoin becoming legal tender and not having capital gains tax is such a good idea, because it's placing the future long-term bets of future voters and the infrastructure of their country on the future money. And you know what? This seems like a good idea for something that's growing faster than the internet. And it's no surprise that Ohio Representative Bernie Moreno says that the founding fathers would have been Bitcoiners. It's because they were bold, they were ambitious, and they wanted to remove themselves from the colonial fiat currency shackles that were put on them from the UK. They wanted to think about the long-term future of our country. Bitcoin represents long-term thinking, which used to be commonplace for investors and leaders. And you know what? We believe that it represents long-term value in your portfolio. Join us at 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific with Senior Research Analyst Sam Callahan, Swan Private members Stephen Lubka and Terrence Yang for a strategic planning session on why Bitcoin represents good value in your portfolio. It's a free webinar, and no worries. If you're not able to make it at 5 p.m. Eastern or 2 p.m. Pacific, just sign up for the webinar and you'll get the recording emailed to you after it's done. So, last thought. In closing, don't be like the Knicks. The urge to hoard more fiat now is going to produce bad results over the long term. Think beyond what's right in front of you and the desire to win right now. Delayed gratification is the name of the game for achieving outsized returns over the long haul. And right now is a great time to delay your gratification and stack more sats. I wanted to let you guys know I'm going to be out for the next 2 days, but returning next week on Monday. You're going to get some great content in the meantime, like our 21 Voices episodes that have been airing on YouTube. If you haven't watched them, check them out. The next one's going to come out tomorrow. And so with that, we're signing off for today. This is Dante Cook with Swan.com. Happy stacking.